I think that the term stutter is used mostly in the United States. It seems like abroad. So in the UK and in India, I've heard the term stammer. That seems to be the preference there. But it essentially the two are the same. For me, a stutter is an involuntary disruption in the fluency of speech. And so, things like blocks, which are silent interruptions in speech, things like repetitions, things like that, and also prolongations in speech as well. That's how I would define it.
And I think you are best placed to explain it because you are someone who has a stammer. And I think this is exactly the best way for us to understand it. And by way of transparency, I should probably say that this is a story that's very close to my heart as someone who, as a young person, used to stammer a great deal and has come a long way since. And so what I want to learn from all three of you is more about your, let's call them stammering journeys, when you first realised that you did stammer and how things have been along the way. Maybe Shilpa, you want to start, and by all means, Carl, William, feel free to pick up and speak to one another.
So I think I realized that I have a stammer when I was nearly 5 to 6 years old. So I was very scared to go to a particular school. My mom had to force me to go to that school. And then she took a step and changed it. Then when I moved to some different school, then I was having some issues with my speech. So I think that something happened, some kind of a trauma happened in my old school that has triggered this speech impediment, if I will say it. So none of my family members actually stammer, definitely not hereditary. So I have acquired it in my early childhood. I was being bullied also. And then when I entered my college, I was having difficulty in introducing myself. And then in 2013, I met the Indian Stammering Association, and it has helped me in gaining my confidence. Yeah, I have been stammering since I got married last year, and I was stammering very badly through the whole event. As in India, it is such a huge thing. It is such a huge event. I mean, all is well since then, I will say.
Well, congratulations on your wedding, and I commend your resilience with ploughing on through all those obstacles and hurdles along the way. William, what about your journey?
Yeah, so I was very delayed saying my first words. So my parents knew that something wasn't right. So they took me to a speech therapist. And at the time, they thought that I would never have a full, be able to speak fluently and have a full vocabulary. And then I had therapy once a week from 10 years of my childhood. And then when I went to secondary school, they said, you're at that stage now where you don't need therapy. You're on your own. And then I went from a school of 70 students to a college of 4,000. Wow. So I really noticed that my stammer was getting worse because of being anxious. And then my doctor referred me to the Michael Palin Center, which offer these intense courses for young people who stammer, where you're surrounded by other people who stammer. But they teach you basically why it is okay to stammer. Then I realised that my stammer was who I am, and I wanted to raise awareness to help inspire other people about stammering.
Carl, what about yourself?
So my first memories of stuttering would have to be in the kindergarten years. I remember being a kid in class, and halfway through class, there was a speech therapist who would come and pull me out of class, and we would work together on fluency shaping techniques. So, trying to be as fluent as I could in my speech. In talking to my parents, I think that my stuttering was noticeable probably at age 4. So I'm not sure if there was some anxiety linked to starting school or anything like that. But similar to William, I had gone through a lot of speech therapy when I was in school. I've also lived my life for a long time living as a covert stutterer. And so essentially what that means is that I would do my best to try and hide or mask my stuttering. And so things like substituting words. And so if I would get up to a word that I thought would give me trouble, I would try and swap that out for a word that would be a little bit easier to say. I would avoid certain people or situations that I thought might give me trouble. And so I, for a long time, felt like I was living two lives. And it was just really difficult, just trying to live in a way that really portrayed who I wanted to show people that I was, and also having that fear of not wanting people to know that I stuttered because I feared that I would be judged or, not thought to be as intelligent. And so for me, that was a really difficult thing that took me a very long time to come to terms with.
Yeah.
And in 2015, I just started a new job where I was presenting a lot more, and I had a lot of anxiety around this. I remember getting up for work in the morning, and I would just be so stressed before I even got in my car, thinking about, presenting at meetings and raising my hand for things. And so I did a search on Google for stuttering support, and the National Stuttering Association is one of the first things that came up. And I went to a chapter meeting that's in my town, and up until that point, I don't think I had met anyone who stuttered. And I was in my early to mid 20s at that point. So being able to see, these people who were working professionals who had great careers, who had various different types of stutters, some who you would describe as being mild stutterers to people who had what we would call severe stutters. It was just really neat for me to see these people who were really flourishing in their lives. And, that experience kind of helped me to see, hey, there's nothing to be ashamed of. There's nothing to hide. This is just how I talk. And so, it's really taken me a lot of work to try and get to that point of just being okay with stuttering, one, and two, being okay with letting people know that I stutter and not saying that in an apologetic or in a deferential way. So yeah, that's a bit about my journey and my experience with stuttering.
I feel quite emotional listening to all three of you because so much of what all three of you say resonates. I too remember being about 7 and being asked to read out a short chapter in class and realised, hey, that didn't sound quite right. And then trying to hide it. And then, like you say, Carl, hiding it is absolutely exhausting. And that's why we've invited all three of you on, because we want to talk about the influence of recent events in the news and what they may have had on your stammer. Let's talk about lockdown, because it's been so hard on so many of us in different ways, and a lack of communication and physical contact, that's been a massive part of it, the isolation. How's it been for you, and how's it impacted your speech? And by all means, please do speak to each other here. I'm going to take a step back.
So I cannot even begin to think about the effect that the pandemic and the lockdown has made on me. So it was a very emotional time. Since I work in essential operations, I work in a biotech organization. We are making anti-cancer drugs. So we were going to our offices. So we never had a work from home option at all. So it added stress because we have to step out in the fear that we might get exposed. And also I stayed alone because I work in a separate city. So I stayed alone away from my family, and then I have to go to office every day. So it was a very hard time for me. And when they made the masks mandatory, so that was a really hard time, because initially I thought that it will help me as I can easily hide behind those masks. But it turned out to be a very bad thing for me, as I already suffered a lot of breathlessness while talking. And the mask uh, did not help at all. So I was, having a very difficult time in even talking a few words, or even just spitting something out of my mouth. So I think we all had to learn talking with the mask on and with very a limited amount of air, and it has not made my life easier. So I think this is the new normal, and we all have to adapt to it. But yes, all in all, it was a very difficult year for me.
So I normally in non-COVID, I work in a very busy London office, and my stammer's better when I'm around people. And when lockdown hit, because my team's a very sociable team, going from that busy office London environment to sitting at my desk working at my laptop was quite a shock in me routine. And one of the things that I realised was this is the perfect time for me to work on my stammer. So I then realised that I was stammering on certain words that I had never stammered on before. So I thought, what can I do to change? And one of the biggest fears that I had was picking up the phone, because I find hello is very tough. And because to talk to my colleagues, I have to talk to them on Zoom, Skype. And I really had to conquer that fear of picking up the phone, especially from unknown numbers, because sometimes I've had previous experiences when people think I'm not at the end of the line. When they announced that masks were mandatory, one of the things that I realised is you don't realise how much you lip read, because when I stand up, I have a slight facial gesture, so you can see that I'm trying to say a word, but because the mask covers a top, you can't see that I'm stammering. So I've had it in shops where I've been taken to the wrong place, to the wrong place in the supermarket because they thought I said something else when I didn't.
Initially, I thought that it will help me, as I can easily hide behind those masks, but it turned out to be a very bad thing for me, as I already suffered a lot of breathlessness while talking, and the mask did not help at all.
So I normally in non-COVID, I work in a very busy London office, and my stammer's better when I'm around people. And when lockdown hit, going from that busy office London environment to sitting at my desk working at my laptop was quite a shock in me routine. So I then realised that I was stammering on certain words that I had never stammered on before. One of the biggest fears that I had was picking up the phone, because I find hello is very tough. And because to talk to my colleagues, I have to talk to them on Zoom, Skype. And I really had to conquer that fear of picking up the phone, especially from unknown numbers.
Carl, what's lockdown been like for you?
It's been tough, definitely. And, some of the things that both William and Krupa have said are things that I have experienced as well, especially when it comes to wearing a mask. I never realized how much I rely on people being able to read my lips, or when they see, that my mouth is open for a second longer than it might take someone else. That typically is a trigger for people to say, hey, something's going on. I'm not sure what, but something's going on. And so that will usually help me when I'm trying to disclose the fact that I stutter. But wearing a mask has made it so that I'll have this interruption in speech and folks won't be able to see what's going on. So that's made it a little bit more difficult for me. I remember going to the supermarket and going to the deli counter to order some meat. And, I was trying to talk to the person behind the counter, and I wanted to ask for a certain type of turkey, and I was having a really difficult time. And I was thinking, it would really be easy for me to just pull my mask down and say, hey, and for him to be able to read my lips. But, in that moment, that really underscored like, wow, I wonder how many other people who stutter are going through some of these same things. And so I went online and, talked to some friends, and, we kind of had that shared experience of, yeah, this has been really tough. And so I think knowing that others have also shared in that difficulty has made it so that I don't feel so alone. But I would agree with William when he was talking about his phone experience. That's been something that I've noticed over the years. I've had difficulty with saying hello, and so I've had to change my intro at times to saying, hi, this is Carl, because that may be something that's easier for me to say in that particular moment.
Do you find that, we've all got those problem words, and that if you don't use those problem words for a certain amount of time, you get anxious about using them? Have any of you found that?
Oh, definitely. There's certain words that I never realised because what I've been saying to people is like my stammer in lockdown has been like an old car, like the engine's still turning over, but it's not fully warmed up yet. Like I have no idea when I'm going to stammer, but I also have that thought, will I stammer on that next word or not? So I definitely have problematic words like certain clients who I work with, or certain names who I know that I'll struggle with. So I'll be very anxious before I need to call that person, or if I need to say that name.
Yeah. And often it's our own names as well.
Yes, that was what I was going to mention.
Definitely.
For me, my name has been one of the most difficult things to say, and I think that is true for a lot of people who stutter. I've been in certain situations where I'll be talking to someone new for 2 or 3 minutes, and I'll be pretty fluent, and then they'll say, hey, by the way, what's your name? And because your name is something that we're expected to know, right? We shouldn't have to think about it. I'll a lot of times have trouble on my name, and so I'll stutter on the C of Carl. And I've gotten so many looks where people, it's common. We're expected to know our names because it's automatic. And the fact that I have trouble saying that, especially when I have seem to be fluent, people are so confused, and so that's really been interesting to me. And I think for a lot of us who stutter, our names have constantly been a source of difficulty.
Yeah, and I know that when that's happened to me, it's quite disempowering, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And also when someone asks us to introduce ourselves, so at that moment, it feels like we freeze. You're about to introduce yourself, and then it just bring back all the anxiety and all the pain, and then we just lose the conversation actually.
One of the things that I found really hard was when I was younger doing the school register, because my name is William. My name was always at the last of the register, so everyone would say their name snappy, quick, and then when it would come to me, it just used to feel like the whole room would just go silent and all eyes on me, because when I was younger, I used to stammer on my name, and I used to just dread the school register every single day because of that reason.
Yeah, that's really interesting, William. And how many of us, have experienced that feeling of dread, right? Whether it's at school or at work, where you hear, okay, we're going to go around the room and introduce ourselves. And I know I've had that feeling of my stomach just falling, or I'm like, oh no, I'm going to have to deal with this.
Doesn't it? The heart beats really fast. Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. All three of you have clearly found ways to manage or deal with the stammer or accept the stammer. All three are various stages in that journey. And someone else who's done that is America's new president, President Joe Biden. And he's spoken very openly about some of the techniques that he's used to manage his speech. First of all, do any of those techniques resonate with you?
Most certainly so. I know that one thing that President Biden has said and been very open about is that when he writes his speeches, he will mark up his speeches. And so he'll kind of highlight within a speech places to take a pause and kind of, words to emphasize. And I think of that when I was a kid and I would have to give speeches, my mom would help me do the same thing. And that's something that I really have tried to impress upon people, that you can stutter and also be an effective communicator. And when you're speaking, it might not come out as fluently as someone else or as fluently as you may like, but I always say, did I say what I wanted to say, and did that person understand me? And if that's the case, I think I did a pretty good job.
That's brilliant advice.
So because I live in the US, it's been really interesting for me to see Joe Biden's ascent to the presidency. I know he's done a lot of work throughout the years with kids who stutter. He met a young boy at one of his campaign events last year, I believe, Braden Carrington, who came up to him and say, "Hey, I stutter just like you." And apparently Joe Biden gave him his phone number and talked to Braden, and they kind of worked together. And he said, "Hey, here's some of the things that I do to help me with my speech when I'm having a rough time." And, I think it's been really neat to see a person who stutters in one of the highest positions in the world. I think that visibility is just really amazing. By being a person who stutters, it automatically makes us more attuned, I think, to other people who are dealing with things or who are struggling with things.
Yes. For the first time, actually, both politics and stammering are being talked about in a single sentence, I will say. People are finally able to accept that someone who is not as fluent in speech can also play a very important role. So for once, I am so happy.
I just found it very inspiring. For me, from the public speaking side of things, so if he can talk in front of a whole nation, the country, the world, it sort of inspires me to go and host a team meeting, or make me want to talk to this amount of people at a event. And it's just really inspiring to see how far he's come up, also how open he is. And then I think it's just helped raise some awareness just that bit more.
Stammering isn't very openly spoken about. People who stammer tend to shy away from the conversation, as you mentioned earlier, Carl. Do you think things are going to change now?
I am hopeful. I am optimistic that they will. We are having this conversation now, so I think that there's an appetite for people to want to know more about stuttering and stammering. I've oftentimes said that it seems to me that stuttering is one of the only disabilities where it seems okay for people to laugh at. And I've had that experience where I've had an open stuttering moment, and I've had someone they have laughed in my face. And I think a lot of people just don't understand what stuttering is. And so that's really why I try my best to be open about my stuttering, and I try to speak even when I know that I'm having a day where my speech is going to be really tough. Because I think that by seeing examples of people who stutter openly and unapologetically, and when we're doing the thing that we fear the most, I really think that helps to normalize the experience. So yes, I do hope that people will, continue to talk about it and continue to ask questions about it as well.